States of America, and
to
to
the
the republic
republic
for
for
which
which
it stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and justice
and justice for all.
for all. It's a little complicated.
Yeah, little delay there.
Okay, let's see here. I'm just going to start taping on my end. Okay, Oswaldo, have you been rolling?
Yep, we're good to go.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, so we'll start off tonight's meeting with our most recent correspondence. We have Carol Moore and Gayla Cerrone. Thank you both. They each have 2 correspondence. Carol Moore concerning our virtual meetings and suggestions for alternatives. I think Zoom, she suggested. Carol, we're using Google Meet right now with the YouTube stream. We do own Meet because we own the Google G Suite. So we already possess it, and in the spending freeze, we're going to continue to go with it. That's not going to preclude us from, using YouTube for comments in the future, which we will address, let's say, at the end of the meeting. Maybe we can try that at the end of our workshop meeting coming up at the beginning of next month, where the public can watch the YouTube stream and comment, and then we can read those comments. For now, maybe if anyone would like to comment on what they see tonight, they can email us, and we'll have that, as preliminary comments for the next meeting. Gayla Cerrone sent an email concerning health concerns over 5G networks and frequencies, as well as concerns over speeding in the town of Chatham, especially in the town of Old Chatham, coming in on Albany Turnpike. So we're going to work to make sure that those signs are more visible than they are right now, and try to get up a digital radar readout shortly, just to deter any further speeding in that area. And I will continue on. We have reports on file from the assessor, building inspector, dog controls. We do not have a report on that, but we have an appointment later on this afternoon. Finance, highway, justice, aging, recreation, supervisor, town clerk. Subcommittee reports. John and Kevin on parks and recreation. I know things have been idle since the COVID epidemic. Are there any reports that you do have?
John.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think my report will actually make sense to, it really has to do with all that's going on in terms of the summer camp and the building project. And I'm sure we'll get to all of that when we, in our old business section. So I think it makes sense to kind of think of that as my report, because
We've been moved to new business
oh, new business, I'm sorry.
in the latest agenda.
That's my fault. I apologize.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I think that's where it makes sense. I mean, I could go through it all, but we're going to repeat it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's up to you, Denal, whatever you want me to do.
No, we can definitely wait until the next section. Sounds good to me.
Okay.
From my position on the Citizens Finance and Planning Committee, we did have a meeting recently. Our chairperson, David Laveau, Tammy, and I, and our accountants are looking over all of the budget. We had a few waiting points as far as our meeting most recently, where we're waiting on news about bonds, about prices for a highway equipment purchase bond, and how those change over the course of time. We were delayed by the executive order with our permissive referendum for the highway equipment bond. So it is a bit of a waiting period. Our other capital project, which is the Albany Turnpike Light, we received one bid that had to go through a bid analysis, which Barton and Lagudas is doing now. Because of this COVID pandemic, we were hoping to delay that and go back for bidding where we'd have multiple bids, hopefully more competitive. We'll see what happens there. Kevin, on Climate Smart and the Action Task Force Committee?
Yeah. Yeah, I have one quick question before I get to that. I'm seeing a transcription of what we're seeing, what we're speaking in front of us. Does that mean our meeting is being transcribed, or did I accidentally turn on?
I think that's the closed captioning feature.
Yeah.
Maybe you turn on closed captioning,
Oh, okay. All right.
but I don't know if there's a
Yeah, I
function.
thought that might be it, but I didn't want to screw it up by pressing the wrong button. But so our committee has put everything on hold except for one thing. Our grant that we received for the installation of the charging station on Railroad Street, one of the stipulations was that the town pay for the provide the charging for free for the first 2 years. Well, we have now if we have not, we're about to cross the 2-year threshold, and so I have been speaking with Tara Donadio, who's our helper from the Capital Region Planning CDRPH, or I forget what it's called. Anyway, she's helping us with all these things to sort out how we go about setting the rates. And I got the information that I need from Tammy. In general, the recommendation is that we determine a rate that makes the fee comparable to what people would be paying for gallons of gas. So I imagine maybe I should bring that once we come up with some figure. I should bring that back again before the board and get approval before setting it up. Does that sound like something I should do? I think so, right?
That sounds good. Kevin, how do we, just because I haven't really looked at them closely, how do we end up integrating the payment method? Is there a credit card reader that goes to this, or?
It's everyone to use the charging station, they have to have a charge point card, which most people that have electric vehicles would have, and then they have to access the machine. They have to plug in their card, and it recognizes them and allows them to use the machine. But right now, that when the machine sees their card, it doesn't charge them anything because it's a free service for now. But once we put all the information in it, some of the information that I had to get from Tammy was our banking, routing information, and our town tax numbers. So that will be in there. So the payment will then go directly to, we can determine what account we want it to go to once we start collecting payment.
Terrific. Yeah, I just didn't understand if we had to buy an appendage to physically attach to it.
No, it's all part of the machine.
Terrific.
And so I'm already working on that. So then I got the information from Tammy yesterday, and then I'll be working with Tara probably tomorrow on it, and then I will report back to everybody on what we've come up with and figure out how to move ahead then.
Terrific.
And
Thank you.
everything else is on hold. That's it for climate.
All right, Abby, communications?
We're not communicating a lot at communications. We're not going to meet for the present time. I did speak a little bit with Tammy and Jeannie about some of Carol Reed's suggestions about possible email blasts, but in my ignorance, I did not understand that an email blast requires a service, which is something that the town would have to pay for. So maybe for the present time, that's not advisable, but that we could do regular emails. So we're working on that. And I've also have spoken with Michelle Munson to see if she would possibly be interested in co-chairing the committee with me. And she sounded like she is interested, but there's no rush on that. It's just something to consider in the future.
I have a
That's it.
question.
Yep.
Have we determined that that it's not necessary to have 2 town board members as co-chairs of committees? There was some confusion about that at our last meeting.
Well, currently the Finance and Planning Committee has a board member and a member of the public. So I don't see how we'd be really deviating from that configuration.
Okay. I was just because when Abby resigned from the climate committee, you told me that we had to have a board member as the other co-chair. So that's
Well, I thought it would be good just because of all the projects coming down the pike to have two board members. I mean, especially with this solar mapping, and of course now with what's going on with the state and other solar things being, driven down the throats of the municipalities. I just thought it would be good to have that. I didn't think it was a requirement.
okay.
All right, Abby, comprehensive plan update review committee.
We aren't doing anything there either. We talked about at one point maybe working on the survey, but doing it through the computer was just too cumbersome and would preclude adequate public input. So that's on hold. Jeannie has managed to speak with all the different venues for the Hamlet meetings, and they've been very patient, kind, and those meetings are all on hold as well. That's it for that.
Terrific. And I need to offer everyone an apology. I think a minute ago I picked my nose on live television. I'm sorry.
I didn't see it.
It was charming.
Missed it.
I hope
Very,
it
very
wasn't
focused.
sustained.
Very focused.
Okay, on to new business. Krellen Park. There's quite a bit going on down there. John, let's go right into you with this being your committee report, if you'd like, and then we'll talk further about some peripheral.
Well, correct me if any information I give is not correct, but we haven't met as a committee. I did advise my committee to tune in tonight because I think, what the focus of the town board meeting is really park and recreation. I hope they do. I think the one decision, just to pick everybody up and make sure everybody's on the same playing field, there was the first controversy was what to do about closing the project. We reached an agreement that we had to in order to close the project, we had to do the concrete, which is going ahead, and we're set to do that. Then there was a decision about the bond. Ultimately, I don't think we need a resolution or anything. I think that there's an understanding that we're going to move forward with the rest of the construction once we're allowed to by New York State. So that really completes that whole. I mean, we're kind of done with that, and in terms of where we're going.
Right. The only thing that's going to be a sticking point now with that initial construction that we approved, it just was brought to light that Ken Pratt, our code enforcement officer, and Bill Wall are working something out with.
Right.
What exactly is going on with the 6 or the 8x8 vertical, just to make sure we're compliant. So.
Yeah, they've got to adjust that in order to build it correctly, from what I understand. I'm sure they'll come up with a resolution how to do it. Then of course, the next biggest issue, which is really community-wide issue, is what to do about summer camp. And I know that is something we need to discuss. I think the information in terms of where we are is that when the stay in place order, or however it's described, came into being, everybody had hoped that somehow this would get resolved and summer camp wouldn't be affected. But it's becoming more and more clear in terms of how the difficulty of dealing with the virus and how to treat it as a community, that we are very well faced with the fact that there's no real reason to believe that summer camp will be safe in early July, especially given the nature of the camp, which is that over 100 children are having lunch and are at times confined to a small area, sitting clearly within less than 5 feet of one another. There are some activities that occur where that's not the case, but in reality, that how we'd get there in terms of safety by July, by the 4th of July or around the 4th of July, is a concern. The other thing that grows out of that is like, well, what will we have in the park if we don't have something? And it could be that we have to do some more waiting in a way, because there are other activities that aren't summer camp as we know it that kids could certainly do. We could sponsor it in some way, like you could have something in the children's garden. You could potentially have some swimming at a right distance, but how to organize that is something we just haven't even begun to discuss. So, and Mike, I know Mike's listening in. I think he's just at the beginning of figuring out what he could do. I did talk, in terms of getting opinions about this, I talked to two people. I talked to Henry Schwartz, who he checked with somebody in health, and their opinion, I don't want to put this on the record because it was Henry talking about somebody else, I don't know who that somebody else was that it would, it's very doubtful that summer camps would be held. I also talked to Sal D'Angelo, who's the superintendent of schools, in terms of what they're faced with. And he already is saying, New York State hasn't closed their schools for the rest of the year, although he clearly expects that to happen. And he's already dealing with what's going to happen in September in terms of both kids being willing to return, being able to return, and staff, that will staff be willing to come back in terms of the safety issue at that point. He finds it hard to predict, but in terms of issues he's beginning to grapple with, that's what he's saying. He also did say that they have a very well-endowed tech room, which Mike would be welcome to use to do some type of telecommunication with kids and do some type of summer thing. He welcomed that possibility. The real issue is that we haven't really know what that would be. The committee hasn't met. Mike hasn't bounced off ideas about that yet. So that kind of is in the very formative stage of what we can possibly, if we do not have camp, what we can offer as an alternative. So I mean, that's where it's at. And the only bright side in terms of the construction on both ends is bright, which is that we will go forward with the pavilion project. And also, as soon as the ban is lifted, with not including town money, the skateboard park can be finished. And at some point that might be available in some way to kids. But all that's got to be worked out. I mean, we're in a new world.
Yeah. And just speaking of staffing and registration, we're getting down to the end of the line for staffing for employment interviews right now for the camp,
Right.
correct?
Right.
So it's a sober decision we're going to have to make, and possibly even this evening. Ooh. I'm sorry, I had an audio feed on my other laptop. And should we get ahead of it tonight?
Well, I think in terms of our format, that we were going to just deal with regular business. I think that getting some type of feedback from the community, getting perspectives from others is really important before we pass a resolution. I know Mike is also checking with the Youth Bureau in Hudson, who really has a lot to do with approving these camps and the public health people. And I'd like to hear Mike's feedback from those conversations, which he's unable to give in this format. But I agree. I think it has to be sooner than later. I don't think it has to be tonight. But for those reasons, I would certainly hold off till next week sometime.
I agree with John on that. I don't think we're ready to make that decision, although it seems we're getting closer to it and we need to make it soon. But it wasn't on the agenda before maybe 5:30 this evening, and the public didn't know anything about it. I think we need to get some feedback before we go ahead and vote on this thing.
Good.
Tough thing to have to face. I mean, really, really difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, kids really look forward to it. I think that, the families depend on it. It's tough, but I don't see where we're going to go with this thing.
Right. All right, terrific. Does that conclude the report, John?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've got to say about our current. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's really it at this point.
Yeah, I know we have some volunteers. Mike contacted me that we've had some volunteers who are still want to get down there and spread dirt on the ball field and everything, but we're gonna continue to hold off on that as non-essential.
One thing that happened is a nice little financial plus. Is it turns out I don't know if Mike put this in his report. Oh, there's Mike. He's right there. Yeah, I can hear you. By investigating the electrical problem with the lights further and further, it basically turned out to be a couple switches or fuses, and they work. So that's $5,000 less we have to fundraise for potentially. So that's a good sign. And I think Justin, Mattson, who's been very helpful, I think he, as soon as he can get going with baseball, he'll be really pleased that we got that taken care of.
Excellent. Mike, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to speak, on camp. I agree with a lot of what's been said as far as outlook. Definitely not looking great. What I'd like to recommend, I've been in contact with a lot of returning staff and reached out in recruiting new staff and planning ahead for the summer 2020. I've done so with being very straightforward that there's a chance that camp will definitely be affected. So kind of going into all of that, being upfront about the potential that camp won't occur. I'd like to recommend holding off on a decision as long as possible. Just not knowing exactly what's going to happen. I agree, the outlook doesn't look great. But it affects a lot of families and a lot of kids. And in my opinion, I think a lot of parents, if there is a possibility to host camp, a lot of parents are going to want to get back to work. So I don't know, I don't know what the deadline should be. I spoke with the executive director for the Columbia County Youth Bureau, as well as the head of environmental health at the health department. And, it seems like everybody's just kind of waiting for information to be handed down from the state in regards to whether or not camp will be allowed. But I'd like to be able to wait for as long as possible for that to happen.
Denal, maybe it would be helpful in terms of what Mike said. Do you think it's worth our while as a board that we reach out to our assemblyman and our senator to see if we can get some information?
Yeah, and also, is it Jessica Nabosny at the youth program?
Yep.
Is that who you talked with, Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
They have a meeting on Monday, and their state rep, I believe, is going to be in attendance there. She said that she'd be trying to get more answers for us as well.
May I voice a concern?
Sure.
I'm not sure that I clearly understand the timeline between registration, when you guys decide for how long to hold out. But one concern may be that if we wait too long and this thing is canceled, which I think it looks like it very well might have to be, what kind of burden it's going to put on people all at once trying to find alternative childcare. It could cause an exorbitant amount of people all of a sudden trying to find someone, scrambling, and it might possibly be easier and more beneficial for people to know well in advance. Although I do understand trying to wait to the last minute in case it can happen, but I think it's a double-edged sword and it gives people less and less time. So as long as the people that usually apply for camp are aware of the fact that there stands a strong possibility it could be canceled, and perhaps they can begin to look into alternative arrangements, maybe that would be prudent.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's definitely important to be sensitive to parents needing to be able to make alternative plans. Denal and I had a conversation about, I have all the contacts on an email thread from last year's camp participants. We talked about reaching out to that group of people to see who might, be already, basically to gauge interest to see who would even feel safe at this point as far as sending their kid to a summer camp. I know everyone's kind of in the same boat and not knowing, what things will look like come July. But I agree to be sensitive to give parents enough time to make alternative plans, and I'd like to determine what that date might be as far as making that decision. And I also agree notifying parents ahead of time or making it public that camp does stand a real chance to be canceled for the summer. So they kind of have, maybe offer to pursue a plan B ahead of time before that decision's made.
It sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. It's almost like a two-part decision.
Yes.
The registration itself can be waylaid. I in the past I've done that at the end of May, primarily because we close out often and have to turn a certain number of families away. So the reason for the early registration is to give those families time to find alternative plans.
Okay, so Mike, if we could all, we could compose an email to that list you have with everything we've talked about immediately and get that out, try to get as much, response as we can. So we can look to possibly make a decision. Well, no, I shouldn't say a final decision, but we can have a little bit more going into a potential decision to close the camp or not. Does anyone have anything else to add to that?
Is there a critical number of campers that we need in order to make the program viable?
I think it's, I think that question is almost a financial question in that how many registration fees collected are going to support X number of counselors and lifeguards were employed ahead of time.
So there exists a possibility that people could let you know that they're interested and their kids attending the camp, but the number could be reduced to a point that it would no longer be feasible? Is that another determination that would have to be made?
I don't know about feasible. I just don't know about, a number of employees. It's more of that.
Okay. Makes sense. I'm just trying to understand. I'm sorry. I don't know more about it, Mike.
No, that's fine.
I apologize.
And, feel free to discuss with me anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, if that brings that topic of conversation to a close, we're going to go on to short-term rental properties. This is something that recently came out. Abby, would you like to speak on this?
A difficult topic to speak on, but I wanted to bring in front of the board the possibility of passing a resolution strongly advising short-term rental owners in the town of Chatham to not renew or look for new rentals during the pause period. For instance, I think until May 15th, non-essential businesses are still going to be asked to not work, and that would help people shelter in place and not encourage more movement of people in and out of the county. Obviously, people that are here and welcome to be here. But I think such a resolution may offer short-term rental people a little bit more support in turning down possible guests. So it's not just on the host saying, hey, we don't want to rent right now, but that the town that we reside in has strongly suggested that for the time being, we don't continue to rent.
Is there some sort of stipulation on these rental platforms that if their property is listed, they have to rent it if anybody inquires about it?
Well, I'd like to tell you that I know everything about this, but I don't. But what I do know is this. There's not an across-the-board statement that you can make that Airbnb has different requirements than, say, HomeAway. I believe HomeAway does not penalize people right now for canceling and not taking future, reservations in the immediate future. I think Airbnb has a little more tighter regulations. I think in fact, they might need a town to mandate that they're not allowed to rent in order not to be penalized. But to be honest, that's not really, I think, our business or our purview. But what we are trying to do is just encourage people to stay where they are while we're riding this out, and maybe helping Airbnb or HomeAway people have a little more impetus to be able to say, for right now, we're not looking to rent.
I think this is entering into some murky water, considering we don't currently have any legislation or any mention of short-term rentals in any of our town zoning or comprehensive plan or any other documents. And in fact, it's even a question if it is a legal use. I know some people feel that it is, but that I believe is a legal opinion. I don't know that we are really in a position that we can make a ruling regarding short-term rentals and telling people what to do with them at this point.
I think that
We have recognized them in the past in town board meetings. What about that?
There's nothing on any zoning. There's nothing on the use table. There's nothing in any laws that the town has passed. We've discussed them, but we've discussed a lot of things that are illegal in this town.
we could bring zoning into this just to, argue about the validity of, are they permitted uses or not? But the point of this.
Well, except for the fact, I thought that we
Excuse me,
decided that.
Kevin, I was still speaking, sir.
Excuse me, I'll wait till you finish.
Thank you. But the point of this wasn't to discuss, their legal standing in our community, but acknowledging the fact that they exist. And if you're concerned about the spread of this virus, and you are aware of what the governor has asked of us to do as far as sheltering in place, then it would be highly advisable to do everything we can to aid anyone that's asking people to come and stay with us from other communities, to perhaps put that on hold right now. I don't see any reason to turn this into a zoning debate. I understand where you're coming from and I sympathize, but that's not the intent of this.
Right, and we were apprised of the presence of these things through host compliance. They are within our town. I remember them being read off in previous board meetings last year, some of the names.
Well, maybe,
Go ahead, John.
I would think that there are two issues here. One is keeping people from going in and out of Chatham unnecessarily. And there's also the issue that was mentioned about that if all property owners, whatever their situation is, were to make themselves available to take on emergency medical people who might need housing, if we really were to become a hot, I think that's a good thing to do. I think the zoning issue is relevant, and I think the way to get at it in terms of the community and the public is to have some type of a statement that we encourage all property owners to make their space available for emergency services, and also that they try to limit the number of guests that they have coming into their homes from out of the area. I think you get it a broader way that way, and you get at what's the intent, and you also don't raise the issue of STRs, which is obviously from the last 10 minutes will become extremely thorny. I think you get at the issue by making it broader and including all property owners. And if STR owners are interested and realize they're a property owner and they shouldn't be renting. I would be very much in favor of that, but not in favor of it being directed just at STRs people or owners. I would address it for all property owners in the town of Chatham.
I agree with John. I think that would be a better way to approach this subject.
It's provocative. What do you think, Abby?
I think it's splitting hairs. I think it's the fear of offering some kind of validity. I think that what's more important here is the public health, safety, and welfare, not the semantics. I mean, John seems like he's, definitely seems to understand the spirit of the resolution, which is to help protect our residents. I appreciate that understanding, but I think it's unfortunate that this has come down to a zoning issue and a fear that we're offering them some credence or validity by just asking, not even asking them, by giving them the ability to perhaps not rent for a little while, that we're just trying to aid them in that. I think it's splitting hairs myself. I understand it, but I think it's splitting hairs. I don't see how it helps them from a zoning point of view by being
Helps who?
mentioned.
Helps who?
The short-term
Yeah.
rental by being
Well,
named in this resolution. I
in
don't
terms
really
of-
understand it.
I mean, Denali, I don't want to go ahead without kind of permission from the chair. It's kind of weird to.
So go right ahead and speak.
Okay. I think that if you make it broader, it has more effect. It's not splitting hairs. They also can use it in terms of their contracts and with whoever their rental agreement with, that the town has asked us to do that as part of being part of this town and a property owner in this town. That's up to them. But I think it has more of an effect if you make it broader.
Who are you addressing?
You're addressing all property owners.
Like who?
All
Like
dwelling
long-term
units for potential rentals.
Any potential renter, actually people who might invite people to come, you're asking them to limit that because of the spread of the virus. And you're also suggesting in the way that if they want to participate, they make spaces available for the potential need of emergency workers. You're accomplishing a lot.
Okay, I think I hear what you're saying. So we could amend the resolution to say encourages owners of short-term rental properties as well as all others.
No.
I don't want, no, all property owners. I do have the issue of STRs and the issue of recognizing them.
I'm willing to compromise and add, and all other properties, but I don't see any reason why we wouldn't mention short-term rentals. Because if they are going to use this to help them back up why they're not renting, it really should speak to them.
I don't think they need, there's no evidence to indicate they need that. All they need
No.
to do is to say, here's what they passed. I'm a property owner in the town of Chatham. I expect relief from my contract. Mentioning them should make absolutely no difference, although I would think, I don't know the details of dealing with Airbnb and how they're going to respond to this request. But I don't think it has any bearing on, just off the top of my head, about whether they'll be successful at dealing with this issue with whoever they're contracting with.
I think they might.
And beside that, I can't imagine at this time that any platform would try and sue somebody for not wanting to rent somebody to their house because they're worried about getting infected with the virus. I think that's a ridiculous assumption.
I don't know anyone that mentioned anything about suing. I didn't hear
Well,
anybody saying
Pardon
anything
me.
about suing, but it has to do with, if you're a host, your relationship with your parent company. if you have, I think you're encouraged to rent, and I think there's parameters in which you can cancel. And what we're trying to do is facilitate the hosts to have the most latitude to be able to cancel or not re-rent at will. There is no harm in this. There's no harm.
Let me know when I might speak.
Go ahead, Kevin, you may speak.
Thank you. I don't think it's necessary. Who in a worldwide pandemic is gonna have the nerve to say you must take renters into your house? We're not letting you cancel your reservation or stop from accepting reservations. I think that's unnecessary. I think John's approach about if you want to encourage all property owners in the town of Chatham to limit people coming and going from other areas to our town to help protect our town from becoming infected with this virus, I think that's all well and good. And since you feel it's just splitting hairs, then let's split hairs this way. That's it.
It's not, I think what the deal is with the hosts, they don't get in trouble, they don't get sued, but it has to do with their standing. There's parameters on how you can cancel and when you can cancel. And I would like to do everything possible to encourage these people to put this on hold for now.
May I speak?
Yes.
I don't see why we have to go out of our way to to aid the short-term rental people at this point in time. When speaking for, I think our job is to represent all the people of our town, and in making a resolution that addresses all the property owners in town of Chatham, we would be representing all the people in town of Chatham and not focusing on any particular group. That's it.
We're not aiding just short-term rentals.
It's not, you just said you want to aid them in any way that you can.
But listen, by doing this, we help them rent fewer times. The fewer times they rent, we help the town of Chatham by having fewer people passing through. It's a win-win.
I
Excuse
agree
me,
with all. I'm sorry.
Go on, John.
One at a time. John?
I agree, but I just don't think there's any need to single them out. And in fact, I think it's a much stronger statement to include everybody in it.
Yes.
And I'm not negating the fact that I don't want to do anything to further deal with the fact to promote the idea that they are legal and somehow acknowledged by this. So I'm not negating that, Abby, but I think in terms of the public health issue, you can accomplish exactly what you're after, and I think it's a very good idea in terms of public health and in terms of a message from the government and our concern about the town. And I think it should just be, and I would say this, is that if an SDR person used that letter and came to the town and said, this really doesn't help me, can you write something stronger? Could Denal write something saying to help out? I'd say fine, but I don't think we need to do this. I just don't think it's necessary. And I'm opposed to it the way it's being presented.
Well, I hear what you guys are saying, and I'm more than happy to compromise and include short-term rental properties and short-term rental and all other rental properties within the town.
No.
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 You're still not getting at it. It's not
You
just
are not compromising either.
You're shouting at me, Kevin.
It's not. It's not rental properties. It's all rental properties. It's everyone. So in other words, is that everybody should do two things. They should not encourage people to come here who are their guests, their friends, their whatever. And they should, if you are in a situation that you have more room, you should be trying to keep that room available in case there's an emergency. That's the public health message.
May I say something now? I find this conversation almost titillating because a short time ago, when short-term rentals were spoken by people that were not in favor of them, what you hear is, I could have a different neighbor every week. I don't know my neighbor. They come and go. So those are the people we're targeting with this resolution. The people that would be up here every weekend or that come and go, not longer term rentals. We don't want to, let's not fool ourselves. We're talking about people that are transient. And there's no group that rents to more transient people than short-term rental, hence the name short-term. So that's why this is targeting them. If you'd like to include other rental properties as well, there's absolutely no harm in that. But I think that this is a good idea and I'd like to move forward with it if possible with the amendment and all other rental properties, if that makes you guys feel better.
Well,
Can
there are two-
I jump in here
Please do.
and just ask Tal, does the town board even have the right to restrict people's rights to move around in the town?
Thank you.
At this point, we don't. That's why I think that the resolution is, can you guys hear me? I have it off.
We hear you.
No, we
Okay.
can hear you.
That's why the resolution is worded as a recommendation, strongly encouraged. It doesn't require anybody to do that. In fact, if we were going to do something like that at an official level, say through a declaration of emergency, we would have to run it past the Department of Health first before we could do that, because the governor wants to make sure that whatever we do locally fits hand in glove with what he's doing on a state level. But I think really just watching this argument is it's very interesting. I think we've come all the way full circle back where we started. And really the point is, what are we trying to do? We're trying to, one, make sure that we limit the amount of travel, that people stay home where they should stay home. And two, we're trying to keep potentially, in case there's a real emergency, open beds for emergency responders that we could shelter for them. The semantics of it, I don't understand why there's such a strong feeling either way. And I think that the middle ground that is sort of working at here of all property owners, including STR owners, are strongly encouraged to abide by this.
I don't see any reason that you have to mention STR renters. If you say all property owners, it means all property owners. There you have
Right.
it.
Well, because I think the point is that the STRs are potentially the greatest source of people coming and going.
Yes.
Well, they are a source. I'm aware that people, that a lot of citizens are really, this is one way that they potentially don't socially isolate. And it could be a problem way beyond STRs. The fact that it would be renters and
Undoubtedly.
STRs, that's true.
Yeah.
But if you broaden it, it gets at everybody. It accomplishes exactly what we're talking about, and does not single out one group, which I think is in terms of the community, is a very sensitive issue right now. And
go ahead.
The only other thing that really bothers me is that we're discussing this in a format where there's no public comment. I don't even think it's appropriate to discuss it in this format.
Public health, safety, and welfare during a pandemic. I think it's quite appropriate.
Okay.
Is that your legal opinion, Abby?
Yes, sir, Bob.
And it doesn't need public comment, right, Abby? This is
Didn't say that-
the head of the communications committee.
Didn't say that, John.
One at a time. Now, Tal, do you think that the emphasis on STR makes it a stronger encouragement?
I think it does. I think that we all sort of recognize that potential because of the in and out, the transientness of it, the very basic entity of it is so transient that does encourage or put more people at risk.
I concur.
Well, let me add another comment, and this is directed at town. This isn't a legal issue, town, about what it adds to the community. The question for you is it illegal or not illegal? I'm really not particularly interested in your public opinion about it. I think it's a misuse of what a lawyer is for in a town situation.
So what's
And I've
what
said that before.
is what
I-
illegal or legal?
Yeah, I mean, you're not giving legal opinion. You're giving opinion about what you think the emphasis should be. And I don't think that's your place in the meeting.
I was asked that by one of the board
I
members.
understand that. And I think it's the wrong thing for the supervisor to do. I've said it before. I think it's the wrong role to put the lawyer in. If there's the other thing you answered in terms of government, that I agree with. That's a role for you to play.
All right, well, that's your opinion. Donnell obviously has something different as an opinion. That's why he asked me, and that's why I gave my opinion.
All right, does anyone have any more comments on that?
I have one more comment on it. Regardless of what we do, we can't vote on it tonight. It wasn't on the agenda. People had no idea that it was going to be raised, and they have no way to talk about it.
I agree with John on this.
Who's going to talk about it?
I don't know. The public's listening. They can't talk about it. You can't get any comment. The
This is
idea,
public.
correct me if I'm wrong, but when you set this government up, the whole idea was to have a better relationship with the public and to have more interaction. You're having no interaction about something that's important.
And we
And they
think,
didn't even know it was going to be discussed, that they could listen to it. I just don't see how, given your own goals, did you go forward with this? It's just ridiculous.
this is a pandemic. This is public health, safety, and welfare. This is not a feel-good. This is not controversial. It's not about zoning. It's about keeping the residents of Chatham safe.
And right, Abby, that's your opinion, and you don't know what the opinions of the public are. You have no idea because they're not allowed to be involved.
If the semantics did not involve FTRs, John, but just involved the blanket, do you feel that's something you'd vote on without public input?
The blanket?
Your
I wouldn't
blanket
vote on that
statement.
tonight. I wouldn't vote on that tonight either. I would say we need to have we need either to do it in an emergency meeting, and we need to come up with a resolution that is a blanketed thing, not an STR thing. But even if it was, if my perspective was the one that somehow we wrote the resolution around, I still wouldn't vote on it tonight because I don't know what anybody thinks of it.
With all due respect, I still feel comfortable moving ahead with this because it's public health, safety, and welfare. It's not about seesaws. It's not about road graders. It's about keeping people safe. And I don't see why we would delay in doing that. Every day counts. Every minute counts.
It's
I resent
funny,
the implication that we aren't taking this pandemic seriously.
I didn't say that.
You're implying it.
It's also curious that we've been isolated for a month, had several meetings, and this has never come up.
Didn't occur to me.
So everything has to revolve around something that pops into your head one day.
Be nice.
This is not the
think-
way government
Hey,
should run.
Easy.
Kevin,
Listen.
at every meeting, you end up being really rude to me. I just want to do business calmly and quietly, if that's okay. It doesn't have to
Well,
be.
you
ugly.
and if I may speak, you end up sort of taking over these meetings, and I think it's a problem the way these meetings are being run, because you basically get to run the meeting, and that's not your role.
Well, your role is being nasty, and that's not really should be your role.
No, that's it. That's enough.
Yeah, come on.
Good for you,
Enough from
Denal.
everyone.
Yeah, you need to run this meeting, Denal.
Kevin, hey, you're done too. Okay, listen, we've gotten through that controversial matter. Let's move on to resolutions. As you see in your agenda, we'll start with Resolution 83 of 2020. Resolution 83 of 2020 to accept the town accountant's financial supervisor's report. Can I get a motion?
Yeah, I
Nope.
so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moved. Hey Vance, you got resolution 84 in front of you?
I do. Resolution number 84 of 2020. To accept the financial abstract as presented to pay the town bills. Can I get a motion?
So
I
moved.
make a motion.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Resolution carries.
Who's next around the old table? Abby, you have resolution number 85 in front of you?
No, I just have the agenda. I didn't print out all the resolutions. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Kevin or John, would you like to read it?
I have to
I
go
got it.
to, I have to go to the back of the class with Abby. I don't
I
have
got
mine
it.
printed out.
All right,
Sorry.
Kevin's at the front desk.
Resolution number 85, 2020. Resolution number 85, 2020 to approve the minutes of the town board meetings of March 5th, 2020, March 30th, 2020, and April 2nd, 2020 as written. Do I have a motion?
Yep.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second that then.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes.
Okay, resolution 86 of 2020 to appoint dog control officer. So what I'll do is, and for the public watching, we had interviews yesterday in executive session. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the first names of our applicants, guys, and I'll ask for a positive vote if one of the board members feels that they are the candidate that they'd like to see. So I'll start right now. We did have one retraction. I'll give the first name of Meg, retracted her application. And so we're down to 5. Applicant number 1 was Justin. Do I have any positive votes for Justin? Applicant number 2, Emily. Do I have any positive votes for Emily? Applicant number 3, Daryl. Do I have any positive votes for Daryl?
I do.
I vote yes.
I vote yes.
I vote yes.
I vote yes.
Okay, so we got Vance, John, Kevin, Denal, Abby.
I vote yes. Thank you.
That's 5 votes for Daryl. That's the whole board. So I am not going to proceed with the remaining applicants. Okay, so Daryl Dutcher has won the job. Resolution 86, 2020 to appoint dog control officer. Whereas the part-time dog control officer position became vacant effective April 1st, 2020, and has resulted in the need to fill the position. And whereas the position was advertised and interviews for said position took place on April 15th, 2020, and therefore be it resolved that the Chatham Town Board appoints Daryl Dutcher effective April 17th, 2020 as the part-time dog control officer at an annual salary of $3,723. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second it.
Well, I'd like to just say we had a lot of good candidates, but I think Daryl will be great for us moving forward. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, Daryl Dutcher. Okay, now some late entrants were resolution 87 to encourage STR properties to limit all non-essential rentals. In this case, I'd be willing to table this resolution for a few days if we needed to get public input.
I second that motion.
Where we'd have a meeting at the beginning of next week, possibly to discuss this.
I'm in favor of that.
Should probably let the public know how they can give comment, whether it's by email or phone call or whatever.
Yes, that's good. Tal, thank you, Tal. Emails can be sent to me, supervisor@chathamnewyork.us. If that's sufficient.
Yep, that'll do.
And also the resolution where we would have been discussing the possible closure of summer camp. I'd also recommend we table that. Mike, if you're still with us.
I think he left.
Okay, but let me see if I get a motion to table that resolution.
I so moved,
Second.
Second.
Okay, and this is something else that I'd like to move on quickly, so we'll get a hold of Mike if he's left the meeting for community outreach. Okay. Finally, to conduct any other business that comes before the town board. Does anyone else have anything to say?
I did have one thing I wanted to ask about, Donal. The Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Benefit Act that was proposed in the governor's budget.
Yep.
Do you know, did that make it into the budget? Because I know the Columbia County Board of Supervisors adopted a resolution strongly opposing that. And just by way of information, it sort of circumvents local government in the siting of solar projects.
right?
And I think there's been a lot of pushback on that. And if that did make it into the budget, I would be in favor of us joining several other towns in passing a resolution condemning that. But I haven't been able to see anywhere if it made it into the budget.
Yeah, no, I'm not aware of that at this time either, Vance. We'll have to check on that.
Donal, I have some information about that. I cannot give you a definitive written statement that it did, but my sense is that it was part of what was I'm almost positive.
I have to agree with John on that. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but I'm 95.
There was a list of them, and it was on the list that passed.
Oh, yeah.
And it is exactly what Vance says it is. It goes around home rule.
Yeah, I was there when we voted at the county level on the resolution to resist that. Okay, that's something to work on towards the next meeting also, if we want to make a municipal statement and keep a good eye on that. So if that's everything.
That's all I've got.
What's that, Vance?
That's all I've got.
Okay, just before we close the meeting, I wanted to thank everyone who's making masks for us right now, who's helping in the volunteer effort, who's passing out hand sanitizer, who's maintaining physical distancing, and of course, by Friday evening, everybody should have something similar to cover their face, I hope.
You're right.
Be safe, everyone. Okay, do I have a motion to close the meeting?
Donal, did you want to mention that you're going to hand out hand sanitizer?
Another shameless plug? Sure.
Just to let people know.
Distributing more hand sanitizer. I invite people to come Sunday afternoon, 4 to 5:30. I'll be back at the town hall in Chatham, 488 Route 95, and use it often. Thank you very much, Tammy, for reminding me that. And we'll close. Be safe, everyone. Do I have a motion to close the meeting?
I make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
everyone.
Night.